So I'm Dani Atkinson at the University of Michigan. I think Michael Meyer is also participating in the audience. I'm here to talk about the GeoSnap. There was some false advertising. The schedule initially called it a 2048 by 1024. I'm talking about a 1024 by 1024 device here. We work with some folks over at University of Arizona also, and I need to also credit Teledyne for making the GeoSnap, and folks at University of Rochester for providing some of the material. So I'm also a little sick. I'll do what I can here, but yeah, if I might finish a little early, I'm sorry. So first, this story kind of starts with the Neocam planned telescope. And that was initially why folks over at Rochester were developing, pushing out mercury cadmium telluride, the miracle infrared material, out to 10 microns. And they got that done. I believe Neocam is still a future telescope planned, and they continued to go further with that material. And working with Teledyne, actually got it out to 13 and I think 15 here. This publication of theirs is from 2019. And so what that did is, well, when you're making an infrared detector, there are actually two parts to that. Number one, you grow the wafer, a big circular device, big circular material, where you have actually made the mercury cadmium telluride. And then you make the electronics that actually run the detector. And then so you cut out some of the material in like a little square from the wafer. You have the electronics and you squish them together. Cool. When they're making their devices, they actually had some leftover wafer, which gave us an opportunity to take advantage of, thanks to the nice folks at University of Rochester and at Teledyne. And so they put it on the GeoSnap electronics, which is how we've pursued, going forward with this brand new detector for ground-based astronomy. Over at Rochester, they're just pursuing space-based astronomy, which has a different set of requirements on the detector. So the GeoSnap, a real brief rundown. It's a Teledyne molecular beam epitaxy mercury cadmium telluride that goes from the cutoff is at about 13 microns. Now, we call these things engineering grade devices. This one is a little more than that. It is the best effort one-off device, not only hijacking a bit of the University of Rochester wafer, but also kind of a first attempt for using one of these ROICs for astronomy. Right now, we can go up to 85 hertz full frame. There were plans to maybe get it up to 100, but right now it only operates at 85 hertz. Again, the device we have is 1024 by 1024 with an 18 micron pixel pitch. Now it actually has electronics that go out to 2K by 2K, but we only took 1K of the material that actually detects the light. And so you can see that kind of picture on the right there. That shows all that's actually receiving the light. The rest of it is all dark because there's nothing there. But when they actually make devices to send out to the astronomy world, science grade devices, those will be totally 2K. This is just the one-off we have. So there's only one quadrant of the device at the moment that is working, but still enough for us to analyze and characterize. Now, we're scientists, so the way to really understand something like this is you have a control. I'm comparing this to the Aquarius. The GeoSnap and the Aquarius detector aren't really in direct competition. They do some different things. But the Aquarius had been kind of the choice for some of these wavelengths before because it was more or less the only advanced detector that could cover them. It actually goes out to 28 microns. That's part of why it has a much lower operating temperature if you're further into the infrared. But the GeoSnap is more focused, more or less. Since it covers only this range of wavelengths, it can operate 45 Kelvin and do better and have some less stringent requirements in some ways. The Aquarius operates up at 120 hertz also. We get 85 at the moment. The quantum efficiency is a good thing to note here. This is also a function of the wavelengths covered. The Aquarius hits maybe over 50% with anti-reflective coating is what they report. We are getting roughly 65 at the moment, and that's without any anti-reflective coating on there, which is awesome. The well depth has also come out comparable. So we are getting over 1 million electrons of well depth, whereas the Aquarius would get 5 million, but you need more well depth if you're going further into the infrared. Let me also talk about, this is a slide I more or less hacked together from some stuff Jim Belitek has presented before. I believe the first time was at Edinburgh in 2016. I actually took it out of a 2019 presentation, but he has a couple of things he targets here. He notes structure of the device, and then the well depth, and then also the frame rate. The well depth has been exceeded. The frame rate is close, so it promised a couple of things, and it is delivering, which is awesome. Not always the case with new detectors. So let's go further into the actual characterization we've been able to perform at the University of Michigan. A lot of what we're able to do is with Mitten. This is the cutely named new cryostat that we received less than a year ago. And it's not only is it big, it's also cools down. This is the best one of these I've ever worked with. It starts at room temperature and gets down to 20K or below within a day. Totally closed cycle, so you don't need to make a grad student refill nitrogen. It is confirmed by us to be dark out to 13 microns with these detectors. Totally dark. That's awesome. At the moment, we are using a crude light source in there. It really is just a glow stick that we can heat up. And in the future, we are going to put in something that actually has some optics and that we can target individual pixels, measure crosstalk and all that. We don't have that to present at the moment, but it's coming. If you want to hear more about Mitten, our grad student, Rory Bowens, is going to be talking about it at the upcoming SPIE that was supposed to be in Japan, but is now going to be digital later this year. So we've also done some work on firmware. It initially shipped with stars from Teledyne, which was able to take all the data, had some features that had never really been developed, but it ran. It was a little unreliable in a couple of ways, and actually time indexes and stuff, yeah. So we actually put together Snap. That was with Dennis Hart, the software engineer that they hired on very recently down at the University of Arizona. Put this nice clean interface together. It takes the data. Stars would take 45 minutes. Snap takes maybe 5. It's great. And it actually does mark everything with correct time and all that. So the data we get out of Snap is a little more reliable and robust. So we have repeated a lot of the stuff we took with stars with Snap. It's great. So just wanted to show some other things that we've been able to get together here that help characterize the GeoSnap. Now let's get into the actual performance of the detector. First up, I wanted to show pixel operability, which is one of the things you do kind of worry about with a new detector. In this case, there's nothing to worry about. On the left, you see that this is a detector with light on it. It looks like there's a gradient. That's just because of that bad crude source that's generating light, the glow stick I mentioned earlier. It is flat. It's just, we'll get the actual optics in there later to make it look better. On the right, that is with no light on it. But I threw up the histograms here of what the pixels are showing in each case. So on the left, you can see that that big lump on the right is the pixels that are actually seeing light, and then there's that little lump on the left that's cold pixels that see nothing, dead. That's about 0.5% of all pixels. Okay, so when we have no light on it on the right, that same histogram, we have another 0.5% or so that are pretending they see light and don't actually. That's another 0.5%. So all told, we have 0.5% that's cold, 0.5% that's hot, 99% that's working. That's awesome. And of course, it's 100% fill factor and all that. We also measured the read noise, and it comes out to about 115 electrons, which is also about what we had expected and hoped for. So reading out a fast detector, this is what you would want. Now, one of the big things with an infrared detector is the dark current. And we found this also performed really well. On the left is dark current versus temperature, what you always want with infrared. And there are 2 groups of data there. The blue ones are with all 4 quadrants operating, and the red dots are just a single quadrant operating. And you can see that, okay, with lowering temperature, it does go down and it kind of plateaus. It hits a floor at maybe 45 Kelvin. This is indicating what happens with a lot of detectors, that you're actually looking at a glow or light that a detector is generating on its own in the electronics. Probably not actually happening in the detector material. You see also that it still goes down if you operate a single quadrant. So the more electronics you operate, the higher the glow gets. More or less what you expect with this kind of thing. This is reinforced on the right with frame rate. So we drop the frame rate and the measured dark current goes further down. Great. It again hits a floor, below 40 hertz and a little more and stops really going down. But this does show that it is just glow. The material is this usual Teledyne MBE stuff, which works great. I'll note also that the lowest dark current on both plots is a little lower on the right plot. The left was always stars, which took weeks and was not able to easily repeat. The right is with snap. So you can see we have been able to get lower than 80,000 electrons a second. The initial target, I believe, was 100,000 a second. Working great. Awesome. I wanted to also talk about one of the odd things we had noticed here real quick was that it has a pattern. So these are different data sets we've plotted here from months apart, March, June, September. You see that there's this odd, the first one is really high and then it goes low, and it has this funny curve that repeats slightly different amplitudes in each data set. This is the same whether you're using stars or snap, so it is something that's more or less happening in the detector. So that's something you have to fit with a line to kind of get rid of it. It does disappear if you're going to lower readout frequencies. So it is some function of the electronics and maybe even how much glow they're being produced at these different frequencies. It's not entirely clear, but it's something to account for going forward. Again, you want to get rid of it. You read out at a lower frequency, it's gone. Now the big one I wanted to talk about here was the 1/f noise. When we initially got the detector, one of the things we looked for was ELFN. Now, this is something we'd noticed on the Aquarius called excess low frequency noise. The plot on the left kind of shows it. If you're going at low frequency, it all of a sudden the noise kind of just pops up. And so it's just referred to as excess noise. It was attributed to something happening in a silicon detector. So we looked for it and hoped, hey, this is not silicon, it's not going to be there. And sure enough, it is not, but we found something different. So on the right is data from the actual GeoSnap, and you can see it's got that curve versus frequency. This is 1/f noise is what it's usually called because it goes, it's the inverse of frequency. And it's in electronics, the presence of 1/f noise is a common thing known in a lot of electronics and attributed to, the behavior of a lot of different components. So we've been hunting this down over the months, trying to figure out where this could be coming from. Number one, it doesn't appear to be associated with a set of specific pixels on there. This plot might be a little confusing at first, but what I was doing was I'd take a set of data and over that set, track the noise of an individual pixel. Does it get higher? Does it get lower as time goes? So one set of data plots a pixel on the y-axis and another set plots it on the x-axis. And if this were basically, if it were always doing something as far as progress through a given continuous set of data, you'd expect it to form a single line. And it doesn't come close. It's totally random behavior for any individual pixel. So it has nothing to do with exactly what pixel you're watching. We'll also say that here it is attributed to the electronics because if you're analyzing it in an area of our detector that doesn't have anything hybridized on it, or a bare ROIC detector back at Teledyne that has nothing hybridized at all, sure enough, it's still there. So it's something that must be a function of the electronics in there. This lines up with basically how 1/f noise is generally understood. We've analyzed a lot of different ways of looking at this. We did median subtraction, where for a column or a row, you take the median, subtract it from everything in that area. No improvement. Do a pseudo CDS, that's correlated dual sampling, where you take data from one frame, you subtract it from the next 9 or 99 or something to see if that corrects it. No, sorry. The detector has two different gain settings, low gain, high gain. No, it's basically the same for either setting. Okay, we vary the temperature, nah. Operating voltage of the actual detector, that also doesn't seem to produce an interesting change. So on the right, I also showed that the noise that's measured can change by maybe 10% in different data sets. There is one data set there that produces a bit of an odd spike at lower frequency. We can fiddle with the electronics, but it's, we don't have anything we can directly attribute this to yet, which is a shame. So At the moment, we're looking at ways to suppress this. One way, if you're looking at improving a signal to noise ratio, if you can't reduce the noise, you increase the signal. So this noise is totally static based on what the level of the signal is. So if you're, say, doing a half well depth on your observation, that does make it relatively lower. This on the plot there has basically the same data where it shows T into 0%, T into 100%. That's time of integration. It's a setting in the detector. If it's 0%, you're not doing any integration. If it's 100%, you're integrating all the time. And yeah, the noise does not change. That's a good way to reduce it. We're also talking about chopping. You can see on the right there that it is possible to get 1/f, maybe down to 1 hertz or even below that. Every 10 seconds or something, you could be chopping. That's awesome. If it's below 1 second, that starts to become a little more feasible. Further information on the characterization, including stuff that we're doing this week. I took some of this data yesterday. Will be presented by Jared Leisenring, who is at University of Arizona, and that's again at SPIE 2020. So a lot of our folks hope to see you there and see us in the audience digitally, of course. We have a couple of deployments lined up here also. We're talking about using MMT hopefully next year, and then also going on to Magellan. For further details about that, Michael Meyer, professor out at University of Michigan, is going to be talking about that further today in this Zoom channel, I believe, at 5 o'clock. So good one to attend. He has a lot to say about what we can do. And going forward past those deployments, we're looking at, this is a detector that should be able to do some actual imaging of exoplanets, we think all the way down to possibly exo-Earths. That will require it being on the METIS instrument, which is planned for EELT. And the fact that this could be the instrument to do infrared pictures of exo-Earths and all that is awesome. That further development, that further reinforces the need to do this kind of development. This detector is sort of unique in this range. So thank you. This is basically all the information we have at the moment on the GeoSnap. It is a detector for an underdeveloped spectral range. There is not a lot of work happening at the moment in mid-infrared out to 13 microns. The dark current come out even way lower than we had aimed for, below 100,000 electrons a second, which is great for this kind of mid-infrared range. And it could enable the potential direct imaging of exo-Earths, which is also awesome. That this could look for those things on these future 30+ meter telescopes from the ground. The 1/f we are still also working on, and we could suppress it with chopping and also just making sure you're soaking in enough light in those pixels so that the ratio comes out about where you want it to be. But in the immediate future, we're looking at also this upcoming deployment starting next year to actually get this thing on sky, which we are excited about. Ask me more. So thank you guys for attending, and that's it.
Thank you very much. Really nice talk, and as you articulated very clearly, this is really important stuff. So thanks for the work you're doing there. So we've got a couple of questions that are appearing in the Slack channel. I'm going to read the first one for you, which is from Warren Skidmore. And this is the 85 hertz rate for the 2K by 2K image, i.e. for the 1K device plus the unpopulated area?
Always good to see you, Warren. Right now it is for the entire 2K by 2K image. The different quadrants have their own readout electronics. So at the moment, if we read it out for the entire device, even without the other hybridization on there, it can still also do 85 hertz. We trim it down to the single quadrant. It's also at 85 hertz. I don't do it really because it's faster. I do it because it's less data that doesn't really tell you anything more. So I don't have to wait as long for it to transfer between computers. That's it.
Okay, thanks. There was a couple of discussions going on even now. So I'm just going to paraphrase a comment or a question from Eric Pantine and hope that this encapsulates the discussion that Leo's participating in. So why would chopping reduce the 1/f noise if it's not correlated noise? Or maybe it is.
I'm not sure I understand the question exactly. The reason you're putting it on different, you're chopping it is to move it between these different pixels. The 1/f is happening for an individual pixel and all that. If you're moving it between entirely different areas on the detector, then you're no longer subject to that. If you're waiting long, then the frequency that you're entirely observing is getting relatively lower because it's over more time.
Eric,
does that make sense?
Eric, we have a little bit of time, so please feel free to unmute and you can continue the discussion with voice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just meaning that in the case of the Aquarius, the faster chopping works because this is correlated noise, okay? In that case, if it's not correlated noise, if it's just random noise, okay, so which has no temporal correlation, in that case, I don't see how the chopping would suppress it, but okay, maybe I missed something.
Yeah, the ESO folks have done some good analysis of this also that is tracking the correlation of it. And it is happening over. I have plots here, I think. I should have put in backup slides on this presentation, so I don't have them immediately handy, but they did some of that correlation analysis.
Yeah, you need to make the correlation analysis for this to make sure that the chopping will act or not sufficiently well.
When you
I apologize for not having it immediately.
When you say it's uncorrelated, Danny, partly you mean just by subtracting medians of rows or columns, it does not go away.
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Let me move on to another question. So do you have some information regarding linearity?
Yes, I'm sorry, I did not include this in the talk, did I? Yeah, we measured the linearity and I got it to be basically over half well, 99.992%. It looked fine, basically.
Okay, wonderful. Then another question, the frame time versus, regarding the frame time versus dark current. So DC plus glow plot. Could the downward trend with lower frame rate continue further if you run the detector at less than 45K?
So the downward trend with lower frame rate, if you run it at less than 45K, let me think here. Downward trend with lower frame rate.
When you slowed it down, Danny, the glow went down.
Yeah.
And we haven't, it's asking whether you've seen a floor or you know exactly how low it can go.
Well, the glow went down, but you know, but it then again started to hit a floor there. So in that case, some of the glow generated is not a function of actually the frame rate. It's some part of the detector that is always operating. So the readout is generating additional glow, but it's not generating all the glow.
Roy, does that address your question?
Yeah, is that a good answer?
Do you want to come back with a follow-up, Roy? Again, we've got a couple of minutes here.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so Danny, what I was wondering about is whether what you're actually seeing is that the proper dark current starts to take over if you operate it slowly enough, because you're still at 45 kelvins. Right?
Oh, that's an interesting question. No, I have not experimented with that, with getting the frame rate lower and then just taking the temperature also lower. No, I'm sorry, I don't have that to offer. I can try it and get back to you.
Please do.
Thank you. And I think this will be the last question, which, let's see, from Hendrik, which was the ratio of well depth to dark current seems to be much smaller, approximately 15 than for a classical detector, about a 400. Is this a problem for fidelity in general or broadband imaging?
From well depth to dark current?
Yes. Hendrik, if you want to unmute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not entirely following that one, I guess.
I just thought about the numbers so that you have, I mean, you have 80,000 electrons of dark current. And then your well depth is 1.2 million. So you have this ratio that you can fill with signal. And I thought in a silicon arsenide detector, from what I just Googled quickly. I mean, you can go up to 5 million in well depth, and you have at 10 Kelvin, let's say you have 12,000, 13,000 electrons. I just wanted to know if this smaller ratio has any issues in practical observations, or if you can get around with this smaller ratio with all the tricks in the book and have perfectly fine observations with a 39-meter telescope. Maybe everybody has to contemplate. It's a totally stupid question, and I don't know what I'm talking about. But,
I guess you're asking if there's a serious dynamic range issue. We read out at 85 hertz, and in that time, we fill the well halfway to 600,000 electrons. The amount of dark current that's collected in 0.012 seconds is very, very small. So it doesn't impact the dynamic range in any way.
Okay, per second and per readout bin. Okay.
Okay, and as we are still fractionally ahead of time, Pat Roach asked the question, does the long wavelength response cut off sharply at 13 microns? There was a response from Michael Meyer there, but do you want to make any comments on that directly, Dani?
I'll say we haven't measured that directly. We don't have a light source that picks out specifically at those wavelengths. So I don't think we have something to offer.